Frederick Willem de Klerk, known as F.W. de Klerk throughout his life, was born in Johannesburg, South Africa in 1936. He was President of South Africa from 1989 to 1994. De Klerk's most significant contribution to South Africa as President was his role in the ending of the National Party's policy of apartheid. Apartheid was a policy that eliminated black South Africans' participation in government and reduced them to a powerless, inexpensive labor force. Born into a family of leading Afrikaner nationalists, de Klerk trained as a lawyer. He was first elected to the South African Parliament in 1972 as a member of the National Party. He became a member of the South African Cabinet in 1978 and leader of the National Party in 1982. 7 years later, he was elected President of South Africa. The National Party had always pursued a policy of apartheid, which virtually eliminated black African participation in government and reduced black Africans to a powerless, cheap labor force. The Afrikaners who ruled the country were convinced that their success was the result of their unity of thought and action. They also brought schools, newspapers, television, and radio stations under government control to mold the minds of young Afrikaners. The Dutch Reformed Church, to which most Afrikaners belonged, provided moral support for apartheid. Opposing views were censored, and dissenters were branded traitors and treated accordingly. De Klerk would change all that. In the 1989 general election for whites only, he campaigned as a reformist. De Klerk had always been regarded as a cautious man, not a bold politician. Few people anticipated the amount of change his election as president would produce. In February 1990, he released Nelson Mandela and other political prisoners and lifted the ban on previously outlawed anti-apartheid organizations, including the influential African National Congress. These moves were far from cautious, and they revolutionized the political landscape of South Africa. These actions paved the way for the abolition of apartheid, and in 1991, under de Klerk's leadership, remaining apartheid legislation ended. The first meeting of the Convention for a Democratic South Africa was held to discuss the country's future constitution. In response to criticism from right-wing whites in 1992, de Klerk called for a referendum for whites only. The referendum was held to determine support for the continued reform in ending apartheid, and it approved the proposed reform by a significant margin. In 1993, de Klerk and Mandela were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts in ending apartheid in South Africa. Although the personal relationship between the two men wasn't always harmonious, it played a crucial role in the transition from apartheid to a democratic, non-racial South Africa. Each man recognized the importance of the other and the need to compromise in the nation's interest. South Africa's first universal democratic elections were held on April 27, 1994, and the National Party, led by de Klerk, came in second. A little over 1/5 of the total vote gave the party power at a regional level in the Western Cape. More than half the votes came from non-white voters, which enabled de Klerk to describe the party as a new force that had abandoned its apartheid past. Nelson Mandela was elected president in the 1994 election and formed South Africa's Government of National Unity, in which de Klerk was appointed executive deputy president. He held this post until June 1996, when his party withdrew from the Government of National Unity. From then until his retirement from active politics in 1997, de Klerk led the official opposition party. In January 1999, de Klerk published his autobiography, The Last Trek, A New Beginning, and has now established the F.W. de Klerk Foundation to work for peace in societies that are divided on cultural, ethnic, or religious lines. History will remember de Klerk as a realistic politician with a greater sense of vision than any of his predecessors.